What's up guys, Danielle here, neutralsupport.net, and it's gauntlet time. Today's contestants are all chain tools. Some you know, some you might not. I'm gonna throw them all in the arena and figure out which one's best. Let's go.
Put your mouthpieces in, both of you. On your mark, get set, go.
Welcome to the arena. 7 chain tools, all from different brands or some duplicates, but mostly different brands. Not every chain tool on the market, but a good sampling. I have 8 metrics to compare these with, so we're going to use math and 2 subjective ratings to decide which one's the best. So there we have it, 7 tools. We're going to go cost, compatibility of speeds, whether or not it works with a SRAM flat top chain, whether or not it peens, subjective ergonomic rating, subjective chain break ease rating, cost of replacement pins, and is the chain tool future-proof? So let's start with cost. So as you can see, there's a spectrum of cost here, with the cheapest being the Birzman Damselfly, the most expensive being the Tutto 2. Now, if you look at those tools next to each other, that doesn't necessarily surprise me, but we're going for total value over all the fields, so the cost will end up being important. Like, what are you getting for your money? So with the Birzman, it does 1 to 12 speeds, which actually puts it kind of in the rough spot. So we'll go ahead and update this guy. So 1 to 12 speeds. It does not do the SRAM, and it does not peen. So at 40 bucks, you can do anything up to 12 speed, but you can't actually do the SRAM flat top, and you can't do the peening. BSC tool. So this chain tool actually costs 75 bucks. It does 1 to 13 speeds. It does do SRAM, and it does do the peening. So for an extra 35 bucks, add 2 features and a whole speed. So you see where we're going with this. Park Tool CT 3.3, one of my go-to tools over the course of my career. This tool actually does 1 to 13 speeds because of its sliding bridge here. It does do SRAM, but it does not do peening. The Park Tool CT 4.3, only 1 to 12 speed, which was interesting to me because this is the most modern version of this tool. They have not made a new version as far as I can tell, and they list this one as discontinued. It only does up to 12 speed, unlike the other one that does 13, but this actually allows you to do the peening. So it doesn't do the flat top chain, but it does do peening. So that's why these 2 tools are here, because they actually kind of complement each other in a weird way. Pro chain tool, back to 13 speed compatibility. It does do SRAM, flat top, and it does peening at $84.99. So that's pretty good. The Tutto 2 does 1 through 13. Just like the Pro tool, it does both things. And then the Unior professional tool, which every time I touch it, I'm surprised it's called that, but this is the Unior professional chain tool. It does 1 through 13 speeds, does not do SRAM, does not do peening. So if you're just looking online, this is the information that you would have. You don't know how it feels in your hand. You don't know how easy it is to change out a pin. You don't know how well it breaks the chain. And so that's what the rest of our fields are for. So we're going to do some hands-on stuff. So let's break some chain. So 7 clean breaks. They all felt fine. They all did the job, but some of them felt better than others. So we have 2 ranking systems. One is ergonomics. I'm going to rearrange these from best to worst. Okay, so the best ergonomically was definitely the BSC. So one of the things is it has a super smooth action here at the lever. It also has additional leverage, which is nice. The handle itself gives you a good place to put both your notch of your index finger and your thumb, depending on how you're holding it, so you get a good grip. Has this nice finished knurling here. It's just overall a very well-made tool. So it reminds me a lot of the Abbey. In fact, it reminds me very, very much of the Abbey, and it works in similar ways. But just the feel of this tool is really good. Second in line, the Tutto 2 actually has this nice angled handle. So if you look at it, the handle is angled from the actual chain tool. So you also get a good grip. There's a indentation here and here. So similar to the BSC, you get a nice feel here. The handle over here is just not as nice. little bit less leverage, but overall very good ergonomics. Move to the Pro Chain Tool. Obviously, it's very similar to this. This piece all the way through is exactly the same between both tools. They just changed the body. So this body is a little bit less substantial. I gave 4th to the Park Tool. They did a good job making a beefy handle. They put these little grippies on here. Now, my complaint about the ergonomics of this tool is it's probably actually too big. So all of this stuff just feels massive. It almost feels like you're a kid playing with somebody's, like an adult's stuff. The grip is just large here. This doesn't actually help with leverage, these squishy pommels. So maybe even just having a normal handle would be fine. But overall, they made an effort to be ergonomic, and it is a little bit better than like the CT3 that doesn't really have ergonomics in it at all. Moving down, this is like holding a piece of stamped metal. So I'm very used to it because I've used this tool a lot, but it does not really have ergonomics in mind. It's very utilitarian, very flat, very narrow. So really, you just kind of get the job done. It feels very solid because it is a one-piece construction here, which is nice. You'll notice that none of the other ones are one piece. Makes you kind of feel like this is not going to actually have any damage ever. The professional tool is coming in pretty low on the totem pole because the Unior is so tiny. Like everything, it almost feels like a travel chain tool. The fact that they call it the professional chain tool and it's this size is kind of astounding. They have 2 plates here for different sizes, but you notice how short the handle is. Like it doesn't even reach all the way down my fingers. It's kind of tiny. It's a very tiny tool. It's not uncomfortable, but it is not comfortable. And ergonomically worst is the Birzman. I can't stress enough how uncomfortable this tool is with its sharp angles everywhere. It's just weird. It just doesn't feel natural to use. It has lots of right angles, like almost like this was a prototype and they just were like, go for it. If this was the same exact size, but all of these angles were just a little bit less extreme, it might feel okay, but the ergonomics on this tool are just all messed up. For chain breaking, surprisingly, the ergonomic rating actually doesn't fully match up with how well they broke a chain. So I'm gonna move them around. Pretty similar, but not exact. So BSC actually still takes the reins for breaking a chain. It actually had the smoothest action of any of the tools. It was very straightforward. And one of the reasons why is if you look at it, it has a super long handle, so you get a lot of extra leverage. It has the longest handle of any of the chain tools represented. If you look at the Tutto 2 and you compare them, you can see the additional leverage that you're getting on the chain pin. So that makes it so that when you break the chain, it is incredibly easy. It's very smooth. It comes out easy. And that's because you have this extra leverage and very good machining through here. The Tutto 2 and the Pro Chain Tool coming in 2nd and 3rd respectively does not surprise me. The retractable pin guide in conjunction with this speed set anvil makes it so that the chain is perfectly straight to the pin, so you always get a straight hit. You might accidentally end up with a crooked hit if you have the BSC because there's nothing really lining you up except for the plates themselves. So with this tool, it's nice because everything gets planed beforehand. If you want to hear more about this Tutto 2 or even the Pro Chain Tool, there's a whole review from Pedro's week on the channel about just this tool. That's worth watching. CT3. This actually breaks chains really well. Part of that is I'm used to using it. I enjoy the way this handle feels, although it's simplistic. The action's very smooth. It's very normal with this sliding bridge here. When you put the chain on it, it makes sure that you're up against the wall every single time and there's no flex or gap. So it does make it pretty easy. The CT 4.3 is hard to use.
What?
It may be ergonomically a little bit better than the 3.3, but having to stick the chain into this trough is just hard to use. And then these don't necessarily feel good. Like the leverage on this, for being so wide, it's actually pretty short. So they're even a little bit shorter than the Tutto 2 in terms of how much leverage you're getting on the chain pin. And that makes it so that it's just not a super comfortable break. The Birzman, I think the only reason that the Birzman Damselfly broke the chain a little bit easier than the Unior is because of the leverage we're talking about. So of all the tools, this Unior has the shortest, well, it's kind of tied with that one. This Unior has the shortest handle. And that makes it so that when you're trying to get the pin out, it's harder. So the more leverage you have, the smoother the pin removal is going to be. Less leverage, harder. So that's why those little crappy chain tools that you get at like box stores or in a kit that are super small and you're turning a little thing, they break, you have trouble getting the pin out because you have no leverage. So the more leverage, the easier getting the pin out will be. And that is reflected in this lineup pretty heavily. So this is ranked 7 being the best, so you get the most points, 1 being the worst, so you get the least. So that lines up. Birzman's the worst. Unior's the worst at actually breaking a chain. The worst of the best, right? So what happens if you have a pin break? I'm going to field strip all of the chain tools and we're going to talk about pins. Alright, so all 7 tools are apart. Now you'll see that most of them use the same system, which is going to be just screwing a pin into the end. So Park tool, the Birzman, the BSC tool, all use just a standard pin that threads in. So it has these threads on it. It just threads into the end of the actual post, and then you put it back on. Sometimes, like the Park tool, I've replaced without even taking it all the way out of the post. So that's the simplest pin replacement possible. Unscrew it, take the thing out. The second simplest pin replacement is going to be the kind that the Park tool and Unior share, which is a pin that actually sits on top of a bearing and then is threaded in with a collar. So the collar actually just slides over the top and threads on. So inside all of the rest of these, there's typically a bearing for the pin to rest on. So you have to be careful if you're in the middle of something or in the middle of grass or whatever. If you need to replace a pin, there is a tiny bearing in here. So that goes on the inside. The pin actually drops in here and then the collar slides on. And twist that on, back in action. So that bearing actually allows the pin to rotate a little bit under pressure. So right now, like the pin's not moving. That helps if you're trying to center on something because there's no friction on the actual chain because the pin can actually rotate. So between the Park tool and the Unior that use the same system, it is interesting because the pins are different. But if you're in a bind and you can only get one type, it would appear that you see that bearing's just going to come out. That you could put the Park tool in there like so in a pinch. So the most complicated pin here has got to be the Pedro's one because with the retractable pin guide on there, there's a whole assembly. So we have a little bushing and a spring and the actual guide itself that you see on the end of the tool. The pin ends up being this. So this pin is super long. You can still buy them just like any other tool, but it is a very specialty item. So not like anything else on the market, a very long chain pin. This is also pretty well supported. So even though it's this long, it's not tending to break because it's supported all the way up to the actual pin surface. And you're much less likely to break a chain pin that is perfectly aligned with where you're pushing. Most of the time it's when you have it on crooked and somebody gets ham-fisted and just keeps turning. The assembly of this is a little bit more complicated than traditional. So there is a ball bearing in the handle, just like it normally has. Then this guy, the pin sits in there. You have this threaded on bushing. You have a spring that rests here. You have the pin guide, and then all of this goes through here, and this threads back on. So the Tutto 2 and the Pro both use exactly the same handle like we were talking about, so I'm not going to do both of them. And it's just an 11mm wrench here. So then you have the retractable guide installed again. So the most complicated pin to change, but still equally easy to source, and maybe you're less likely to break it. I don't know. So how much do these pins cost? So the cheapest chain pin that you can get is for the Unior tool. It's only $1.50. Now I will say, almost all of these are sold in pairs, so you'd have to invest, $8 instead of $4. But I divided it up so just like one pin costs this much. Now with BSC, like we talked about, harder to get the actual pin, so I'm not sure exactly how much it would cost, so I'm basing this on the Park tool cost, even though you'd have to modify it. It seems like it would work. Might be kind of a pain, so maybe it gets knocked down a little bit. In terms of cost, definitely the Unior is going to be the cheapest pin, but none of these are gonna put you in the poorhouse for pin cost. So the last category on this list before we start doing points is the tool future-proof? So no tool is future-proof, truly, because all of these companies need to make money. So they may decide not to give you the piece that makes the tool future-proof. But they do technically advertise as being future-proof. For example, the Pedro's tools advertise that they're future-proof because they can actually replace this bridge. So in the event that a technology comes out that needs a different shape or size of bridge here, it is a replaceable piece with this little bolt that you could actually take this bridge off and replace it with one that was compatible. That is, if they make that bridge available come the time when the tool needs to be compatible with something else. They might decide to not make the bridge separately if they feel like they need to make money by selling you a new tool, or they feel like they've changed something fundamentally about the tool that makes it so that the bridge is a different shape, something like that. So future-proof to the point that they say it's possible. So is it possible for it to be future-proof? Pedro's is yes. The Park tool has this sliding bridge, which would seem like it would be a yes, but it's actually a no because they made it so that you can't remove this bridge. So this is a permanent piece that you can't take off. So if this bridge needed to be a different shape, you just have to get the next version of this tool. So that's the gist of the future-proof. The other ones that definitely aren't future-proof are going to be like the BSC. If you look here, the bridge is a machined piece, so it will never change, it will never be narrower, it will never be a different shape, it's always in the same spot. So if something dramatically changes, you just need a different head here. The cool part about this tool though, besides everything, it comes with your peening and your extra pin here. We're going to take this handle off. So the handle is fully removable. So technically you could potentially buy just this piece if something changed in the future, and you'd have this piece and the handle already. So it might be cheaper than the whole tool to just buy this cylinder here from them and then mount it. Also cool, this is actually a 1/4 inch bit holder, so you could make a screwdriver handle out of it, and you could store whatever you want in this cavity, like your candy or something. All right, so let's go down the line. Based on this very mathematical and scientific grid that we have here, the BSC edges out the Tutto 2 by just 1 point, which is not surprising to me that those would be so close because they are the nicer of the chain tools here. In terms of metrics, they do the most things. A little bit questionable on whether you'd be able to get a pin for that. So maybe deduct a point there, maybe they're more like tied. This seems to be exactly how they lay out in my head based on experience using them. For the sake of argument, I'm actually going to do total without cost because cost actually weighed pretty heavily into this. So if you're on a budget, and that is a consideration when you're looking at this, then BSC tool seems like the best value. But if you're not on a budget and all you care about is the other stuff, I don't know what the numbers are going to say yet. So I'm actually going to total them without the cost and see how it ends up, see if it skews things a little bit. So if we look at this without the cost factored in, it actually changes things up just a little bit. So it flip-flops the result to the fact that the Tutto won and the BSC chain tool came in second. So I think that inherently these guys are really tied. If you're looking for value, if you're looking for something that actually fits in your budget but does everything, feels awesome, was made awesome, the BSC really fits. It checks all the boxes here and comes out on top. If you want a chain tool that has all of the features you could ever imagine and a lot of extra little farkles that make your job just a little bit easier, that Tutto 2 is really hard to beat also. So I think either of those tools would be equal in my mind, and I think the numbers basically show that. They flip-flop when you stop talking about cost, but they stay pretty close to each other. The rest of them end up where they end up. And if we wanted to crown the worst chain tool on the table, I think it's pretty obvious which one it is. Boom! So there you have it. The BSC tool is the overall winner if you factor in cost. The Tutto 2 edges out the BSC tool if we talk about features. So there are a lot of features on this chain tool that are not present on the BSC tool. The BSC tool really is that simple, elegant, beautiful piece of machinery. Now, if you want to store stuff in the handle, the BSC tool is also the way to go. Either would be an awesome addition to your workbench. They are both great tools that would last a lifetime. They work on everything. If we ever go to 14-speed chains, maybe this bridge might come into question with the BSC, but at that point the world is ending, so should be fine.
Anyway.
So thank you for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, go ahead and subscribe to the channel. There'll be more gauntlets like this, more tool reviews, other fun stuff. Head over to neutralsupport.net. I've got swag, other ways to support the channel's growth, and make sure that I can still afford tools, except for the Abby because it's very expensive, and I did not feel like buying it just for this test. As always, hope you guys have a good day.